Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying.
Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon Podcast. A bit of a change of gear today. Impromptu live stream at 2:30 on a Wednesday. We were going to do a scouted episode, but obviously some news has broken, which we need to discuss. And let's just jump straight into it. So hopefully you can see on your screen right now the article from David Ornstein from The Athletic, probably the most reliable you can get. Arsenal's Kai Havertz set to miss the rest of the season due to hamstring injury. Arsenal forward Kai Havertz is set to miss the rest of the season after sustaining a torn hamstring during the team's training camp in Dubai. The Athletic reported on Tuesday that Havertz was to be assessed after suffering the injury. It's unclear yet whether the 25-year-old will require surgery on the problem, but his focus is on getting fit for the start of the 25-26 season. Just to give this a little bit of structure, just to come to sort of, we can sort of jump around a little bit. Well, we're going to give our kind of initial response. We're going to talk through factors, sort of hopefully get a picture of everything that has contributed to this, sort of how we got here. We both want to make sort of separate points around various things. We're going to talk about potential solutions, also including in terms of on the pitch, but also recalls and youth players and so on. We want to talk Mikel's position. And then at the end, we'll come to as many questions as we can and take in extra points. So yeah, hopefully that gives it a bit of a structure. But obviously in these sorts of situations, it might jump around. Also, what might be sort of achievable for the season from here. Thank you all for being here and for being here on quite a difficult day. George, I found out at 11 a.m. and you were fast asleep. So I was waiting for you to wake up so we could go live. We are here now. Initial response. How are you feeling?
There's a lot of stuff that I have to say about chickens coming home to roost. And for the first thing I want to say, and I want to get it out of the bat, we need, as a fan base, to stop weaponizing sensibility, because this was valid concern that was well planned out for. And we need to seriously have a conversation about making sure this never happens again. This is negligent on every corner of the club as far as a decision-making process goes. And if we can't agree on that as fans, then we are prone to making the same mistake. If we can't understand about how we've got here and fairly adjudicating the reasons to that, and we'll try to consider a large amount of things, but at the fundamental core, if we don't understand the root problem, we're going to continue to have a version of this down the line. And by the way, I've seen versions of this transfer market failure before. It wasn't just a case of this window. There was definitely some things that we can maybe look at through our tenure that have a glimpse into this idea, but from a core process, and I've said this before on Twitter, we are far too cautious as a football club about making a mistake, and it means that we don't make any decisions which in the end leave you worse for wear, that leave you worse had you made a decision and a mistake as well. And it really reeks to me of this prohibitive approach, and this approach to winning, which is cautious and fearful. And I don't think that's how you win things.
Yeah. And I think that goes right across from top to bottom onto the pitch, even in the way we play. It's cautious, it's predictable, it's long term, it's all of that, and that has to change. Look, I think my initial feeling was a kind of sort of, I think I went through the sort of the 5 stages of grief quite quickly. Of sort of, I just sort of laughed at it at first, and then I was pretty depressed for about half an hour. And yeah, hopefully I'm finding something here. I think really what it comes back to for me is, we'll talk about the factors and we'll come to them in just a second. And, where we want to apportion blame, where we want to say, it's the Cronkies or it's Arteta's training or it's the players that were signing injured prone, or wherever you sit. I think for me, there's one priority really here, and it's that the players make the game. However you get there, however you, whether you like the Cronkies, whether you don't like the Cronkies, whether you think this is negligence or not, wherever you are, the players are the most important thing. So whatever methodology you choose, if it ends up with players 2 torn hamstrings, with other players being dead on their feet because they're supporting other players who are out and playing far too much football. We're now going to have to go into an incredibly difficult period of the campaign with 3 players who are going to be rinsed over and over again. However you get there, I actually don't care particularly what your opinion is. The players make the game. And so not supporting this group of players, not supporting this coaching staff, not supporting the players to go out there and do their absolute best with the right talent around them, with the right preparation, with the right support, that is undeniable negligence. Whether you like the Cronkies or Tim Lewis or Mikel Arteta, whatever, the players go out there and they are the ones on the pitch. So, and we haven't supported them enough. We haven't provided them enough support around them. We haven't provided them enough respite. That is the failure. That is the fundamental failure, that these players have not been supported, and that's a real shame for me. Let's come to look. No, this situation is not one factorial. There's many things that could go into this. So I want to maybe lay out the ones that could go into this. I think the Cronkies long term, I think the Cronkies in the short term are both conversations. I think the sporting director is a factor. I think the player profiles are a factor. I think there's a conversation about Mikel and his training methodology and the amount he asks of players and maybe rotation. That's a factor in this. I think the market is a factor. I think I'm probably forgetting others, but I suppose, what do you see as the biggest factor, or maybe can you single out one thing that you think is the biggest factor here?
Yeah, the board. I know we're going to consider other things, but mate, like, okay, if I am going to go ice skating, do you not think that it's reasonable to bring skates with me? Now, if I don't have skates, okay, and I go rent skates, do you think it's reasonable for me to go call the place that I'm going on to see whether or not they rent skates? Probably.
Yeah.
And then you go anyways to an ice skating excursion, having never called the place, never been to the place, don't know if they rent it, but said they must. There's ice. That's what just happened here. And I'm sorry, mate. Like, I want to address something within the fan base. It's very rare that I try to at least blanket statement criticize everybody. I got met with tons of people justifying the fact that Arsenal didn't spend money on a recognized forward in the year 2024. In the entire year of 2024, Arsenal never spent money on a recognized forward. Now, I don't understand how, after an entire 18 months, like previously, even prior to the season that we had just exited in 2023, Arsenal had a forward issue. Arsenal had an issue in which, even in Gabriel Jesus's pomp, even in terms of him at his best, there was this idea that whilst he was brilliant between the boxes, we are missing something in the box, even at the best. So I'm really not understanding nor hearing the logic that this was a problem that sprung up on us. This wasn't something, and by the way, it was top to bottom agreed that everyone felt that X factor, moments in the box, whatever semantics you want to use, that was purported by many people. It wasn't just one. Mikel referenced it in countless press conferences. I don't agree that we didn't recognize that there was an issue in the box. So it wasn't just a forward, but an issue in the box, right? Now, fast forward, okay, and I'd actually love to throw it back to you, because I'm struggling to understand the logic why somebody can make a coherent argument that there is nobody in world football that could improve a team in an entire year. I'm not even talking finances yet. We haven't even talked the revenue. We haven't even talked the reality of the books. So not like a made up fear about UEFA and about PSR, none of that. We're talking purely from an idea standpoint. If I have a problem and I go into the window and one of the prime recruitment is needing a forward. Why do you feel that in an entire year there was no forward in the world that could have helped Arsenal Football Club?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking me, and I don't think that, and I do think that view is maybe was around more in the summer, and it's very fringe now. I think that might have been as something that people. There might still be people
Do you
who
see
are
how
who
they're
do feel that.
connected though? Like, do you see how they're connected? Because if you're relying on that being a criticism in the summer and you say, well, it's a failure of the summer and we can't reference it, and we move towards January, because it gets worse, by the way. It's not just that. So you get to January, and now you know in January, the forwards that you selected that weren't even a good enough group to begin with, that you already said is a recognized summer failure, of that group, your best player in the squad went out with significant injury that you knew was going to be out for more than 2 months of the rest of a 6-month season. Then another forward goes down. So it's not just one. So of the group that you said it's not good enough already, 2 of those recognized, experienced forwards. One is out for completely the end of the season, and the other one is out for at least a quarter to a third of the remaining games. Then that means, okay, when January comes, I'm sat there with the unreasonable expectation that I must sign somebody that is ready now, that must deliver now. And I'm sorry you put yourself in that position, because for all of the forward planning that you failed to do in the summer and you agreed you couldn't do in the summer, then you're forced to do something in January. Not only that, you do nothing in January. So for me, they are completely linked. And I think the frustration that I go off of is because I can make an excuse for a January window being a difficult window to buy a forward. I think that's actually a very coherent argument. That makes sense. No problem with saying that. But then if I'm going to add what happened in the summer, and then I start asking myself, okay, am I going to honestly sit here on camera and say that Arsenal had over a year of planning to do in this area and felt ultimately that nobody could help Arsenal's situation, or that Raheem Sterling on loan is the best solution to that problem? I'm sorry, mate. I feel like you're lying to support the club. If that is the idea that you can make over a year.
I fully hear that. I do think that's quite a fringe view at this point, though. I don't think many people would disagree with that at all. And I think maybe the juice of the conversation really now is there might be some people looking at sort of luck potentially, and sort of going, okay, they might have shifted that conversation to luck. And I think there is an argument here, or it's part of the factor, because ultimately any club with however you've got here, 4 of your best forwards out are going to struggle. But the point is, they're not. The luck and the outcomes aren't necessarily not linked, and I think this is a massive thing. Is that if you look at Kai Havertz dead on his feet against against Wolves, I think it was, we could have seen this coming. You know, like, yes, we've had a bit of bad luck. He's torn his hamstring. We could have seen how many minutes we're putting into Bukayo Saka. You know, these things are linked, and maybe that's the only place that you could come back to. I don't think there's many people making the argument that Arsenal shouldn't have done something. I really don't. I think, yeah, let's come to some super chats to sort of freshen this up. Mojman says, sign Wissam Ben Yedder on a free. I don't think so. We'll come to some sort of some free transfers later to see if there's anything that we can be doing there. I doubt it, unfortunately. Thank you for super chat. Anthony says, Theo Walcott, dust off those boots, my brother. Nicholas Bentner. Is Shamak around anyway? Thank you for super chat. George says, KSC don't know football and don't love football. Well, I think as we discussed before on streams and stuff, I think they're rooted in the long term. They're rooted in this long-term vision, this long-term planning. We'll go after our stuff in the summer. And I think my worry is they don't have the ambition to look right now and do things that other owners and other teams around the world do in the short term to try and fix issues that are in front of your face. As George was laying out, it's not just that the issue was apparent in the summer in terms of quality, and I think most people could see, and I think even the board could see from what we know, it's that they didn't react when those two guys went down, and that puts more injuries and more load on the Martinellis and Havertz's of the world, and they've gone down. To use another analogy, we love an analogy on the Cannon podcast. It's like you've got a textbook of 100 pages, and you've not revised the last 15, and you go into the exam, and 50% of the questions, unfortunately, are on those last 15. Now, yeah, you're a little bit unlucky because you went into the season with six attackers, basically. But equally, the only thing you can control is revising that last 15 pages. And you didn't do it. So you have to take the blame. And you have been a bit unlucky. But in the end, you had control. You had the ability. You had 3 months to revise those last 15 pages. You didn't do it. And that's the only thing you can control. You can't control what's on the page, but you can, what's in the exam, but you can control what you revise. And I think that's where I stand.
I'd even go further, mate. Like, in following that analogy, it's like you refuse to go to the extra hours TA right before the exam, in which the TA says, I would study if I were you the last 15 pages, because that's what happened. We had 2 people that injured and we knew it. Like, they came up to us. So it's not only you didn't address the 6 that you had, multiple people dropped out from that.
Yeah.
And I do want to talk about the luck thing because it's worth addressing. How many of our injuries have come from hamstring or soft tissue muscular injuries? Of the major ones, would you say 70%?
I don't know. I'm going to look on Premier Injuries because I don't actually know what the numbers are.
Ethan was out with a hamstring, right? Bukayo Saka out with a hamstring. Martinelli out with a hamstring. Kai Havertz out with a hamstring. Jesus is the only one with a full rupture of a cruciate ligament. Ben White, long-term injury that we had agreed to delay a operation for. Am I missing anybody?
Bukayo thigh, Ben knee, Gabriel Martinelli thigh, Kai Havertz hamstring, and Takehiro Tomiyasu knee. Yeah,
and I can assure you, because everyone saw the scar of Saka and immediately I got inundated of things of, is he dead? It was hamstring, right? Like, so thigh was hamstring for a lot of this. And so Martin Odegaard, what was his injury again?
He rolled his ankle.
Rolled his ankle. So you could argue, of those, rolling your ankle and another cruciate ligament, which I don't even agree is luck on a player who's already destroyed the same ligament. Like, this is a player that is inherently different, by the way, from a major injury before, with multiple ideas there, but we can make an argument it's unlucky that he goes down. So 2 of those players and the other 4 that have gone down and contributed to this factor are all muscular injuries. Wait, they're linked. Like,
absolutely. And I don't bring up luck to say it's the only factor. I say it's a factor that you have to look. If you make a certain action, you stretch your leg, it happens, and just things happen. But we can't ignore how much Kai Havertz is running, the load that's being put into these guys. That I think we have to begin to ask questions of the methodology. Now, do I have the information as a YouTuber to know what the methodology is and the running? There's very little publicly available running data. If you look at the Ange situation, I would say it's more extreme than us. But I think we are well within our rights to say there's a bit of luck involved. Yeah, it depends how much you put onto it. But also to say, okay, we need to start asking questions, as you're saying, of these muscular injuries, consistent muscular injuries on players that have played a lot of minutes. There must be some kind of link here. Now, this is very hard to do because you don't have access to the data. You don't have access to what the medical teams know. But when you're seeing a pattern, you have to look at it. So I don't think it's about ruling out any factor. It's about deciding how much of the factor you say. You know what I mean? I think it's got to be a balance. Mafio, this club is unambitious and they're not desperate to win. Fans have been patient enough, but this is unacceptable. I think I would only counter this with the idea that I think we are ambitious, but I don't think we're responsive enough. Because I genuinely, and hand on my heart, believe that we're going to spend hundreds of millions in the summer. And that is ambition. That's what it is. the question is, are we the sort of club who would go, okay, we're on for a title this season. I'm not going to bank on 5 years down the line. I'm going to bank on now, and I'm going to put 60. I'm going to put Ollie Watkins. I've got a point about the Champions League later on. Actually, I think AFC James made this point on X, which is to get through to the quarters. I think you get 11 million euros for the round of 16 in the Champions League. You get 12.5 million euros to be quarterfinalists in the Champions League. You get 15 million euros to be the semi-finalists. You get 18.5 to be runners up, and you get 25 million to be winners. Is a semi-final, quarterfinal, that extra money for Ollie Watkins, that's paid like that. And that's what I worry about with the Cronkies. It's like, can you not see that these have direct impacts on your campaign? And you in the end, by being so long term, you lose out in the short term, and that affects you long term. So
it's actually even worse than what James is talking about, because you have increased market pool share. And for example, Arsenal at this current moment right now have equaled their total Champions League spend of last year, despite last year reaching the quarterfinals. We have gained the same amount of revenue. And that's because it's an exponential increase on your market pool on a team that is in the Champions League. It's exponential growth. So it's not just the 12 to 15 million that you gain within the round, by the way. It is more, because within each of those rounds, I think at Lucas and on X does a brilliant job. And I go to him for most of my commercial revenue points. But there is an increased kind of market pool share from teams that enter those rounds. And it depends on your coefficient. So the longer that you've been in and the higher that you've been in from the previous season and in the past and the history all contribute to this market pool that teams share. And it increases. So look, mate, like from my perspective, we have equaled last year's commercial revenue of the Champions League already. Yeah. So that's already extra money if you really want to count it. If we want to count from a money perspective, we cleared our biggest revenue growth in the last year by over 100 million pounds. We entered for like the first time in the last decade, the top 5 most cash producing clubs. Can't say cash rich, but certainly from the numbers, we have produced the most cash, at least as a top 5 sense, beating out Liverpool. And mate, it comes down to a fundamental decision that they felt that 15 million pounds was not worth the risk of something more in the summer. And I think a lot of it comes down to a lot of the pushback that I'm hearing is, well, what happens when you feel that we got, potentially Alexander Isak coming in, right? Like what do you make as a potential solution there? And my constant point that I've always said is it doesn't matter if Isak is a maybe. I don't bank the fitness of my assets and my squad, and I don't bank the team's potential on a maybe situation. That's lunacy.
Well, you have to balance it. And you sometimes go for your long-term target and say, okay, well, we'll wait because we really think that player's worth it. But we do that all the time. And that's my concern with us. And it has to be a balance. Sometimes we've got an issue now. We solve that now. We don't get exactly the player we want, but we do improve. And it feels like with Arsenal, it's long-term or bust. And this is just showing the Deloitte money league here. So this is in terms of the revenue. Obviously, Real Madrid way out in front, but Arsenal 7th above Liverpool, above Spurs, above Chelsea, above Dortmund, above Madrid, and not far off, Barca and Bayern. And I don't understand how you can look at that money league or the stuff that George was talking about with, I think it's, Lou Class, I think his name is on X, who does loads of great stuff on commercial revenues. And how much there must have been something we could do from our best estimates, and I just don't buy that there wasn't. I really don't. Let's carry on with the super chats from Alex, who says, "How did they not see this coming?" Well, that's the question, absolutely, and I think they did, but I think they basically were not prepared to go that extra mile to solve a short-term issue. And this is the long-termism that I really push back on and I find really difficult. Arteta should walk end of the season. KSE failed him. Yeah, we wanted to come to this later, so maybe it's a good time to do it now. Look, Arteta was clearly spending, and Arteta was not blameless in all this in terms of his squad selection, his methodology and stuff like that. But, just in terms of making a signing. He isn't there with the checkbook. Where do you think he would be on this? Because he must be really angry. He must be, because he must have been pressuring them for years to get something over the line in terms of the forward areas. He directly called out the lack of spending in the forward areas. He said, "We're asking for it, I'm pushing for it," and then he said he's disappointed. Then he's punished immediately with Martinelli and Kai Havertz. He must be fuming. I don't think he'd leave, but it absolutely is a question of it's a red mark for sure. You'd be looking at your owners and saying, you haven't supported me here. You've left me out to dry, because we all know who's going to get it in the neck at the end of the season. Not really from Arsenal fans, but from the wider media and sort of the wider football world. It will be on Arteta. Another season of Arteta, no trophy. Another season where Arteta doesn't get Arsenal over the line. And he will see that, and I think be quite frustrated. No,
yeah, I mean, I'd be let down, and I also just don't think he's a person that likes to accept that, and he won't feel himself that he deserves most of the blame. If you really want to do this, everybody, we love to do this in terms of football discourse where it's all spectrum and what the percentage of blame lies. But I think as a person, somebody who warned about this problem for years in advance. And he does this a lot, Arteta's not afraid to challenge ownership. And he's not afraid to disagree with board members and other people as far as recruitment goes. And I think that Mikel, you could make a cogent argument, whilst definitely not making the right decisions. No one ever does. But as far as holes in the team, he always predicts the correct holes to go after. And then it's a matter of whether you want to debate the individual asset and whether some things were good enough. You talk about the Calafiori and the Marino spend summer. Is that a great spend of £70 million in terms of what the squad needed? Fair debate to have. Mikel certainly thought so. I don't know if that was priority, but I actually don't think in that context he felt £70 million would then prevent him from getting a forward altogether. I don't think that anybody makes that logical argument. And so he sat there feeling as though that he's got the wool pulled, or the rug pulled out from under him in a sense, because I'm sure he was having conversations that were centered on a forward and a forward of significance. And even if you're telling me that £70 million was the only thing that Arsenal could spend, which is hogwash, it's nonsensical, but let's go with that argument. Let's try to justify the nonsensical. If you were telling me that £70 million was the only thing that you could spend in a year of finances, then I would be questioning what you did the year before that led to this decision, that made you only spend £70 million. That's fully game. And you have to sit there and say, okay, at what point, if you're going to say that it was somebody else's fault, whether it's Mikel's, the board, Tim Lewis, whoever you want to specifically blame, and I'm not going to tell anybody who to blame, at some point, the club needs to sit down and they need to create a strategy, again, for us to have an objective standpoint for when intervention can come in, when there are people that have a fail-safe button, I like to call it, where people have too much power, where somebody has too much power in a decision-making process. There needs to be somebody at the very top that is outlining a plan of clear objectives of who is the responsibilities, where does it end, what are the consequences to not succeeding in those actions, and what are the rewards for succeeding in those actions. That's very basic leadership. It's very basic delineation of responsibilities, right? And I don't feel confident we have that. I don't feel confident, and it's not just a sporting director thing, right? Like I struggle to understand, in reading between the lines of a lot of the leaks between what Mikel has said. I don't think Mikel feels that Jason Ado is somebody that didn't recognize issues. I don't feel he looks at Jason Ado as somebody that was restrictive to his own opinions and his own thoughts. And so then you sit there and you wonder, okay, in the decision-making pool, if you want to throw in Josh, Tim Lewis, Ado, Arteta, if 3/4, because I'm only going based off of what James at Gunner Blog has reported, which included that Josh agreed with Mikel and eventually gave the green light. So if you're telling me of the leadership group, 3 people felt that a signing was prudent on some level, and it didn't get done, out of like 4 executives, not only do I think it really highlights somebody, but beyond that, beyond the individual, how did you arrive to this situation in which you all agreed that something needed to happen and nothing got done? Like, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a problem internally, but it's also a problem externally, where I had this issue with this around the Saliba situation. I remember at the time just being like, what, just say you want him at the club. Just literally come out and say, we want him at the club. We're just sending him out online to give him some experience, and then done. Because there was all this speculation around whether he'd be here, whatever. And that's a micro situation. This is a macro situation. Just communicate. Just say, just have someone at the club. You know, Edu and Vinay used to do those videos on Arsenal.com where they sort of outline what was happening. They'd be saying, we're working on the squad, where they sort of talked us through the rebuild a little bit. And we haven't had that sort of communication for a long time. And I think that's what that does is it leaves a gap where things can fester, where people can come up with solutions and come up with ideas and conspiracies and things that maybe aren't really rooted in reality, but just don't give that gap. Just communicate in the best way you can, whether it's to the Athletic or I would personally prefer directly on Arsenal.com. Jason Nato coming out and saying, this is what we're doing for this window. We tried for this. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it done, and that's what happened. Okay, people can accept that you've tried and you did something. And there's reasons for that. They can't accept silence when there's silence and there's lack of accountability and lack of we tried but we didn't do it, and that's on us. You can come to terms with that. But when there's silence and there's just nothing and there's rumors, you have to sort of piece stuff together. That's when problems come. So I'm really keen for them to communicate about this, because I don't know what's happened. And that's a big issue, I think. Let's come back, just in the interest of time, to some super chats. We'll do a couple more super chats, then we'll come to some solutions. And then we'll sort of finish with some more as well. So, Elisa, this is a executive management issue. If not remedied, Arteta will walk, and then the players will follow. Fans need to request for these changes executively, or banter era will swiftly return. Well, I think a point that Elisa raises there around the players is a big one as well. And again, around communication, I don't know, but I would hope that the Cronkies are having serious conversations with Saliba's agent, Saka's agent, Gabriel's agent, Rice's agent, Odegaard's agent, whoever you want to talk about, saying, we're going to fix this. Sign your deal, because we're going to fix this in the summer. If they're not communicating internally, because they're not communicating externally, if they're not communicating internally, again, stuff can fester. Saka's agent starts going, well, if they're not going to support you, they're not going to take load off you, they're not going to sign good enough talent around you to help you, why would you sign a new deal? Because at Real Madrid, they'll sign player after player after player to support you. So why would you? And so I hope that's happening internally. And I'm sure the players think about this kind of stuff. I'm sure they do.
I think that far too often, I don't see clubs, and this isn't just an Arsenal thing, but when things don't go well, I don't understand why clubs don't send out briefs, for as much as they want to do the hope on it. Why they don't send out briefs in which saying, I'm going to hold my hands up and I made a mistake. Yep. The club have sat and reflected on the decision, realizing that the decision was wrong. This is what led to that decision-making process. This is how we're going to address it in the future, and how we're hoping to ensure that this never happens again. That kind of a brief, for me, is sending a lot stronger leadership message than the continuous briefs that we get, justifying the minutia and the semantics on transfer feasibility. Like, the problem's not transfers. The problem is decision making at its core. It's I know you had said earlier in the stream, like, everybody would agree, George, that we needed a forward, and that decision, and it's something that's already passed, and it's kind of a major part of the summer window failings is that, and it's kind of a fringe problem. But for me, it's a problem about leadership decision making, strategic outlook, and planning. And so if it's a failure at the summer level, it's a failure in the January transfer window level. It's also a failure the previous year, because you've sat there and for whatever reason, which you haven't communicated to me why, but the entire previous year that you spent kind of recruiting and analyzing data to find a list of targets to even recruit haven't panned out. So it's like over a year and a half of kind of decision making here that's been an issue. And I mean, I don't know, are people forgetting last year in which we also were hamstrung when Arteta played Declan Rice at center back and he wanted a center back in the January transfer window? Like, it's not just, again, for me, it is not just this last year. There have been signs, certainly for me, that Mikel has disagreed with a member of ownership. And so this idea, even pre-Edu leaving, for me, was how much power does Edu have? We all had that debate. We all had that lack of clarity towards everything. And I think when you have very public issues and public failings, it's fair to question that. And I'm kind of a bigger fan of transparency into the why, but more specifically, what are you doing to prevent this in the future? Like, if somebody came out, and I'll actually give a solution instead of speaking in vague terms, okay? For me, a really clear solution is having a clear organizational structure, defining the sporting director as far as what Jason Ado do. Okay, what is his role of responsibility? What do we envision for it? And what does he control? What's the power? I'd like that outlined. I'd like to understand where that decision-making process lies. I'd like to understand Tim Lewis. I can infer, and I really feel he's the faucet to the Cronkies. But, okay, you've got to communicate because something has happened as far as valuation. Whoever's setting the value tag needs to, if it's a collective effort, then say it's a collective effort between Jason Ado and so and so and so and so. And then we can sit there, and it actually helps these individuals because you sit there and you try to blame things and you infer things and you fill in the blanks on something that you don't know, because that's what you have to do. It's the only thing that's available to you. But at some point, again, you need to take ownership of that failing, and you need to make steps to address it, mate.
Marino in the Bellingham role. Christ, no. Speaking of, Madrid have no centre-backs, but they make it work. Why can't we with our attack? Let's talk solutions in just a second. We're going to come to Tactics Board and sort of discuss how we actually get ourselves out of this. And also, towards the end of the show, we're going to talk about what's sort of achievable this season, what we feel is realistic this season now based on this new information. Thank you for Super Chat, Gabby. Ivan Smith, thank you so much for your Super Chat. Mikel is partly to blame for not signing a body, but the board should take responsibility and tell him that he's wrong. Making a bad signing is better than doing nothing. Mistakes are part of the job. Negligence is not. And I think really maybe what Ivan's getting at there is kind of what we're saying there. It's a sense of who is to blame. Like, let's just have it out. Let's just see what it is. What actually happened? If you tell, I look around at, like, Aston Villa and Chelsea and City, Madrid, obviously with their sort of their membership thing, Barcelona. It feels like I feel very close to Arsenal in terms of the players and the coach. It feels like we get a lot of communication from them. But in terms of, I haven't heard from Tim Lewis ever. I've never seen him interviewed. I've never heard from. The last time we heard from Josh was that interview in probably
Be Excited.
The Be Excited properly, that interview. We've never heard from Stan. We obviously Vinay's left. We've never heard from Richard Garlick. We didn't hear from Jason Ito. And I just think, how much does, let's say, Joan Laporta talk? How much does Chiqui Begiristain talk? Hugo Viana, whatever the new Man City guy, he's already having conversations with mancity.com and just explaining, here's what I do. And it takes the guesswork out of it and stops people blaming people where they don't need to be blamed. Mafia, we could have bought Mika back for 10 million if needed. Yeah, we'll talk about sort of solutions and stuff. Andre, I feel like KSE go after the American sport model. I think they certainly have, and they're certainly more long term than I'd like them to be. And finally, Eric Case says ultimately the board are completely at fault here. I hope they are not the reason we don't win anything, and then Arteta leaves due to lack of support. But I hear your perspective, but I don't think I will ever, on any issue like this, be able to say this person is completely at fault. This person is completely. For me, it's a very complicated web. I would say the board are mostly at fault here, but I think you have to look at a number of factors. We'll come back to the super chats, so we'll pause there. Let's talk solutions. So first one, I believe we can't recall Fabio Vieira. I think I checked.
We missed that opportunity.
Yeah, we missed that window, which again is, I mean, when Saka and Jesus go down, that's the first thing you do as a fail safe, in my opinion. That was the one thing I was like, okay, well, definitely going to say, if we're not recalling Fabio Vieira after two right-sided players go down, surely we're signing someone, and we don't. Reece Nelson is injured, so we can't recall him. Free agents, I don't think it's worth even talking about because it's like Diego Costa and Mariano Diaz. It's just not a conversation it's worth having. Probably the one that is worth having before we get onto the board is the youth conversation. I know you spoke to Will yesterday about sort of who's ready.
Became suddenly very relevant.
Became very relevant. We'll have to put that out. But yeah, is there? Talk to us about the sort of the options. Obviously, Butler Oyedeji, Sergio Jr. Who's there?
So part of the problem, and I'm just going to say it right now, is none of the solutions that we have are physically ready. They all have a con. And we don't have a group of attackers in the under 21s right now that are ready to contribute for the first team. And we're in the middle of a churn. We're looking to get rid of a lot of people, and we're looking at the younger class of the U18s and the U16s who have really top talent. And, a lot of people are going to talk about Andre Anus, who's really the only recognized major striker that we've got besides Butler Oyedeji. And with Andre Anus, who's got a phenomenal record as far as, the U18s go, this is a boy that is not ready physically to deal with adult football. And he's been doing great. And he's at a level, he's exceeding what he should be doing at his current time. He hasn't even touched really U21 football with enough vigor yet. He's had some matches, but again, he's not a regular starter there. And he's also not somebody that was booked out for loan as well. This was a year in which Andre needed to actually grow a little bit physically and take in some more academy football. Butler Oyedeji is an odd one. He has gone out some loans and he's failed. He's excelled in youth football. And as far as going through the ranks, he's always been an output player. But then every time he's gone out on loan, it's been uninspiring. And he is the oldest player of the group. Like he factually, A, his contract's running out. But B, he's also, I believe, he's 22.
22,
well.
yeah. 4th of January, 2003.
Yeah. So he is the oldest one. But he is not somebody I would look to. Look, I think Charles Sajo Jr. this is the one that me and Will agreed on, is the most ready to replace a starting injury. We kind of quartiled it into replacing a starting level player, which needs more minutes. And then we said, okay, what if you just needed an extra 15 minutes in the game and you needed like a short sub appearance or something in those veins? We said short term and long term. Long term was Charles Sajo Jr. and then short term was Ismail Kabia. And the reason is because Ismail Kabia is a right winger, incredibly small, not physically ready for adult football. However, has an elite skill. Very much.
Rapid.
Yes, absolutely rapid. Is the fastest player at the club, like recording wise. And so from a pure physical standpoint, in acceleration, he's got that. But again, he's really quite small. He's going to suffer under contact. This isn't a player that is going to thrive against a low block situation. He also needed a loan that we ironically denied. He had a loan lined up. I believe it was Plymouth. He had a loan lined up for the championship. And yeah, we canceled that because of all the injuries and stuff that we had. And he was in need of a championship type loan, to be honest with you. That was a brilliant loan opportunity that we again robbed him of. And so yeah, when you start to look at it, Keon Edwards is a shout for me as far as readiness goes. His career took a real big stall towards injuries, really. He is somebody that I thought combined a lot of the best of Balogun and Nketiah as a profile, really. Like he was really quite a complete striker, and he did get like a fairly good loan as far as going to Leyton Orient. He didn't perform great, but he got great opportunities because it's a player that I think the football fraternity have a look at and say like he is talented. But again, it's another player who had a lot of his progress halted by injuries and long-term injuries as well at that. And so he's another one that's at the end of his contract, coming up this summer. So that's a striker. And it's more in the false nine route. I think Charles Sajo Jr. is somebody, by the way, who is a winger by trade, but absolutely can play false nine. He has done it in youth setups. But again, he is quite small. And the way that he plays is a lot more true winger-esque. He doesn't I don't think being tiny means therefore you can't compete physically either. That's just not the case. Like I look at Ethan, I look at Miles, they aren't the tallest books on the shelf, but they physically are incredible. So yeah, you're going to have to look at some creative solutions, none of which are ready. All are a con, and you accept that. But I think Charles Sajo Jr. is probably the one with the least amount of like risk in air quotes so far. And then,
and Mikel's played him. Mikel has played him, and we in a Carabao Cup game, obviously away at Brentford, and that's a level of trust. So I think a year or over a year on, I think I'd be interested in seeing how he's getting on. Chido Obi, anyone? Someone on the chat said Lamine Yamal looks quite good. That guy at Barca. Let's do a couple more super chats before we come on to our tactics board. Sort of see how we are. Done that one. TM, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Terrible from the board, but also Arteta in terms of squad planning goes for, I presume you mean another fullback and goalkeeper while crying for Saka support for 3 years. That quote about the best players playing 70 games, age like milk. I don't know whether Arteta's been really pushing for Saka support. I think he's found different solutions out there. I've got my opinions on this. I don't think we'll ever sign the Saka backup that everyone wants. I think it's always going to be a Jesus or a Wanyeri or someone who can play out there, because ultimately you don't sign a Salah backup, because if he's fit, he plays. There's no point. So yeah, I think you have to just find different solutions. But I think that's absolutely, as we discussed before, in terms of the summer. I would just we're back to the same thing. I would just love to know, what was Mikel's priority for the summer? Was that achieved? Why couldn't that be achieved? If you're telling me, if I can get guaranteed concrete information, Mikel Arteta only wanted Mikel Merino, Calafiori to permanent David Raya, and he wanted Sterling and Neto on loan. If you tell me that, I'm willing to look at Arteta and say that's not what we needed. We needed something else. I just find that very hard to believe, frankly. So it's really hard to know where to look. And I think ultimately, when it's like anything, who takes ultimate responsibility here? It's the Cronkies. It's someone like a Tim Lewis, and that's who I look at and say, look, actually, maybe the problem is down the line, but you're responsible for everything. You take all the blame and all the money when it goes right. So why can't I look at you when it goes wrong? So that's where I'm looking, really.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I can say is the who you're going to indirectly, you can't prove. This is very much like the feeling on the referees, ironically, in terms of, you can't prove how you feel because we have no communication. So you're going to fill in any type of blank. The only blank that I think is categorical is that everybody felt that a forward was a priority, because we had been hearing whispers about that for eons before that. And fundamentally, we didn't do it. So we knew that the objective was get forward. None were got in 2024 as a whole.
I'm going to try your name, Pratamesh Waghamod. If I'm anywhere near, I'll be buzzing. The club have become too cautious with transfers after getting burned on the Pepe transfer, and Arteta insists you have to make every transfer window count. Hasn't helped with that. I do think there's something in this. I think the Pepe thing, the way it happened, and possibly what was going on with Raul Sanyehi, not that we'll ever know. And again, that's another thing. I don't know if they can say anything legally, but that never got quite confirmed. It's another. Just confirm it or deny it. Either way. Anyway, maybe they can't. I don't know. But what seemed to happen with the Pepe thing, and obviously Sanyehi leaving, I do think there is this checks and balances. Reading between the lines again, is this checks and balances? Tim Lewis, we can't overspend, and I'm the Cronkies guy. And if that's the case, then I would be putting the arguments like the ones we talked about the Champions League earlier to Tim Lewis about Ollie Watkins. I would be absolutely putting that argument to him. Like, what stops you spending an extra 10 million? Because, by the way, we would still have Ollie Watkins, a guy who can't change in the same room as everyone else.
Still not good enough.
Raheem Sterling and Trossard. That's still not good enough, but at least you'd have Ollie Watkins.
Yeah. No. I don't want to go in terms of just yelling into the void. As far as it goes, the only thing that I will say, mate, like, I just hope that we can have honest conversations, like amongst our own fan base, to say that like something hasn't gone right, and we can criticize the club for it. Because what I'm seeing right now on X is there is a section of like certain fans that believe when you say it's luck. Here, this is the point that I think a lot of people get really angry with, and I'm just going to try to summarize it because I get really angry with it. Luck is a factor. If you want to be semantics about saying it's part of it and not the whole thing, no problem. I can understand. But you surely, when you make that assumption, the insinuation is that it's a bigger problem than what the other person is saying. Or at least that's the implication that I think a lot of people receive with it, right? And so, yes, luck is a factor. It's unlucky that a lot of forwards have been injured. Yes, no doubt. Here's a perfect example of it. Ben White, Tomiyasu. It is unlucky that two certified right backs and Timber, between Timber, White, and Tomiyasu, it is absolutely unlucky that two of those options are out injured and were long-term injuries. That's luck. Now, planning-wise, we recruited 3 experienced right backs to compete and right center backs, if you want to include Saliba, but we have 4 options for 2 positions. Good planning. So you can attribute a large portion of blame to luck. Now, when you make that, or try to make that same argument to a forward line, that with 6 positions, or 6 players, by the way, for 3 positions, one of which was a 17-year-old that you at the beginning of every season, even if you were the biggest Ethan Waneri fan, felt that 500 minutes would have been a great achievement for the kid. And he's already cracked on at over 1,000 minutes. So if you're making the cogent argument that of those 6, one of those was a 17-year-old, and then of those 6, a Raheem Sterling loan was viable, I think you're being disingenuous on the planning. That isn't the same as saying Ollie Watkins is bought and then Kai Havertz goes down. Do you see what I mean? Like, the luck portion isn't the same. It isn't the same.
Argument. It's not the same in the forward areas. I hear that, but again, I do think it's important what we're saying semantically, and ultimately this just comes down to every interaction you have with each fan. Each fan's going to have a different perspective. My only opinion is that it's not black and white. That's my only pushback is that it's not. It is luck or it isn't. It's, you have to find how much luck you basically think is in it. And I think you're right, by the way, on probably a portion more luck in the sort of the back areas and probably less luck in the forward areas. But it's still a factor. Like, I don't think you can deny that.
No, it's a factor for sure. It's just the portion, because you're gonna ultimately, it's kind of what you said before, who is to blame? Like, in order to find the problem, the root cause, we can't say, well, this is a part of the problem, this is a part of the problem, this is a part of the problem. You consider it as factors. You have to. I do think you have to pick at least a solution. I mean, if you want to. I mean, also you can just moan. I think, but so. on a podcast like this, I think you have to say, look, and ultimately, my biggest factor and the thing that I'm looking at the most is the board. Absolutely, hands down. But yeah, as I say, the only thing I'm pushing back on is it's completely not Arteta, or it completely is Arteta. It's more than that. Matthew Harvey says, Alexander Moneypenny, CF. What do you think, George? Bring out the tactics board. I listen, I could stick my shin pads on. I reckon I could give you 1 sprint and I'll be done. Would it even be a sprint? Would it even go marked down by Opta as a sprint? I'm not sure. But obviously we are in a bit of a difficult situation, just to say the least. But yeah. I've heard Marino centre forward. I've heard Calafiori centre forward. But we do currently have basically, Sterling, Trossard, and Waneri, and then youth players, and that is a really difficult situation. We've also got a Kieran Tierney who has played at left wing, which is a mad thing to be saying, but our manager played him there, so we have to consider it at least. We also, and not to do pure copium, because I do think the season's over, as we'll come to in a minute, but if Martinelli can come back, let's say before the end of February, which isn't out of this world impossible. We haven't got that many games before the end of March. If Saka can come back fit and we don't rush him, we'll come to it. But there's a world, but it's like that bit in a movie where you see the character running and the door in front of them's closing and the door's getting lower and lower and lower and lower, and you're like, they're not going to make it, and that's happening to our season. So, yeah, I mean, talk us through what you do. Yeah, there are a couple solutions. First off, it really depends on how we want to set up and who we want to platform, right? Like, so for this solution, what I like about it is you have basically Ben White and Raheem Sterling as your width holding options, right? And you essentially have this kind of leaned in 3-2-5 in which we really secure kind of our transitions, but we have Martin Odegaard that's going to be feeding in. The issue is we don't really have enough runners in this setup, and I think that the only change that I might be willing to consider with this is there's a really tactical answer of Mikel Merino being used as a Maro and Fellaini that I'm not willing to entertain. So I'm just going to put that out there. It's not.
Is it you'd rather not talk about it publicly?
No, like I don't mind talking about it. I mean, the whole idea, right, is to have a runner here. I don't mind talking through it at least, but again, I'm going to repeat, this isn't a solution that I believe in. But
George
you
loves
essentially have him at
He's
center
lying.
forward. And he makes these runs into the box, of course. And you've got a situation in which your 2 8s at this point are Martin Odegaard and Ethan Nwaneri on the inside, and you're trying to deliver balls. And I don't think it's Sterling in this instant, by the way. Like I think if you're gonna lean into this Brexit mode, you do this.
Oh
right?
my gosh.
And if you're gonna lean into it, you fully go into it. And you have balls that are delivered for an aerial ability to attack, and you've got these 2 overlapping fullbacks. Again, it's not something that I really enjoy, nor is it something that I believe in. I think that fundamentally, when you kind of have this situation here, we need to go a little bit more attacking for me, because we're missing quite a bit. And so let's just take Marino out there because he's not a serious solution in my humble opinion. And for me, you're operating a little bit more with this kind of in mind. And Miles will come inside, and I think instead of Kieran here, let's put him out. I do think this is what I feel is going to be the best bet right now, and what we're going to see. And I would look at Ben White holding the width. I'd look at Sterling holding the width. I do think that Kieran Tierney can hold width, by the way, as well. I'm gonna say something as well that you could probably also do tactico-y, very much in the same way that a Mikel Merino can. But Miles is gonna be in this corridor, right? And I think Trossard and Odegaard, to me, this is just small. This quartet of Ethan, Odegaard, and Trossard is very small in the middle of the park, right? And I don't think Miles fixes it as well. So from this perspective, I don't know who's sticking the ball and who's making sure that we can work off them as a reference. Trossard is going to be that in theory. He has to play that false 9 bit. But then again, when he drops into these areas, him and Miles compete. When he drops into these areas, Odegaard is going to compete with Ethan and Trossard here. And so it's not going to look fun is the easiest way to say it. There is an opportunity here in which we do see something a little bit more like this. And, instead of basically asking for there to be no one there, we full on put Miles as a left center mid. And I'm going to put not Jorginho, but I'm going to change it to Calafiori. This is an option for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I would say that is you effectively have Miles. He lines up kind of in this 10 in essence, but really he cheats to the left. And this is a guy that can make underlapping runs. This is a guy that this pod works for me on the left. It has some synergy. And I think in terms of Miles making some lung bursting runs here, Calafiori can step up and he can control these areas, and Trossard can drop in and interact. And I think in this pod, they've got nice symmetry, and everybody's played on the left there. The problem is like you leave the right hand side a little bit isolated, but again, I don't think this matters too much. But are you really dropping Martin Odegaard long term? No, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's also, you could take it a completely different route and go, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori, Kieran and Ben White on the wings as full wing backs. You could go that route. You could go fully secure the bag in terms of really packing that center and playing for set pieces and free kicks. It will be really interesting to see where they go with it. I quite like that Miles solution. I think in terms of thrust and in terms of bravery through the lines, because my main worry at the moment is not necessarily that I still think we'll control most football matches. I don't think it'll be a problem. It's going to be who's going to be the difference maker, and a difference maker has to be brave. And Miles is one of our most brave players. Ethan is one of our most brave players. Those are the guys that I look at, and I want a platform. Someone relying on a Raheem Sterling to make a difference, I just think isn't going to work. So I think I look at people like Miles, I look at Kieran Tierney, I look at Wanyeri, I look at Ben White, those types of guys, and I say those guys have got the bravery to do something to win a game. And that's the guys I'm looking at, because the Trossards and the Sterlings, love them, but I can't see it.
Yeah,
and the Odegaards, unfortunately.
Yeah, there is also an opportunity that you see something a little bit more like this with Ethan Moore in terms of the false nine, and like, Odegaard is, nominally at right wing, but with somebody holding the width like Ben White, you've got an ability to push him inside, and so he operates more in the zones that he's used to, really. And by playing like Ben White in this is more of a wing back system, isn't it? Like, it's really going to more of a 3-4-3. I don't love the message it sends.
Yeah.
So opposition are already going to come onto us in quite significant fashion. So I don't like conceding into terms of a 3-4-3. I know needs must, but I think it sends the wrong message and tells opposition to come onto us and that we're scared naturally. You can play it very attacking though. Like, back three systems don't inherently mean ultimately defensive. Like, this would be a quite attacking system, right? Like, you've got Ben White up here and you're basically looking at this back five to really defend transitions, which I think is fine. It's not something that I'd be afraid of doing. The only thing is, between these three groups of players, it's a very small center of the pitch, right? And I think no solution that I find there, unless you have my tactico-y answer of Mikel Merino in there, competing for aerials in the box, you're not going to really find a solution that moves people well. And we're going to have a really big issue against low blocks, in my opinion, from now until the rest of the season. And even when Bukayo Saka and Martinelli come back, like, let's say like the heavens open up a little bit and we've got some more players, right? And say we were to throw in a Martinelli and Saka back into the fold here, right? And you take out Sterling. And we'll have Bukayo back out here in terms of what we know. You can kind of make a cogent argument that something like this works for me. And it actually would be my ideal. And I think Kieran Tierney, the only difference that I would have here is you're not getting Miles on the team, which seems incredibly harsh, but you need somebody to hold the width effectively here so that Martinelli can be the one that pushes into the box and has like a box presence. He is factually our biggest box presence that's remaining right now. He is the league's leader in terms of the 6-yard box, in terms of creating stuff there. So getting him in central zones, for me, has to be the move for the rest of the season when he's back fit. And mainly because I feel that in these areas, Ethan and Odegaard can take on the creative burden centrally. Like, I trust these guys a lot more to do that. And so I end up looking at this formation when everyone's back fit as saying it's not ideal, but it's something that I could see.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move off the tactics board then and get back to super chats to finish the show. Before we do that, though, people have been saying you can't just ignore free agents. And so I'm going to show you the list of the free agents. This is everyone available. All positions, all nationalities, all age groups. Alexandru Matan, Daniel Amati, Wissam Ben Yedder, Alvaro Valle. I think we've been linked to him before, haven't we? That Valle guy.
Goalkeeper, yeah.
Rafinha, Ryan Kent, Harold Preciado. We could go for Sergio Aurier, Brandon Williams. Those Saka debates went well for him. Vital Muasa. My point being, we absolutely can ignore free agents. We absolutely can. And also to make the point that we'll talk about it. We'll finish the stream on this, but I don't see us getting anything out this season. But I'm looking at the next 3 games: Leicester away, West Ham at home, and Forest away. If we got 6 points, maybe even 7 points out of that, I think I'd be okay with that. I think that's Champions League form. I think I'd be okay with that. And I think we'd have Martinelli back by Sunday, March the 9th, away at Old Trafford. And then, we're maybe a couple of weeks away from Saka. And if everyone stays fit, it's not what's the word? It's not ideal. Of course, it isn't ideal, but it's sort of teams that you can put out and say we can at least sustain something here and sustain being in the top 4. I don't think we're going to fall off. Was my big worry. Let's finish super chats, then we'll come to sort of the remainder of what we want to talk about. Ivan says 19 of our 22 first team outfielders have missed or are set to miss 1+ game to injury this season, with many missing much more than that. No team can win trophies with that sort of luck. I think it's a massive factor. I'd love to see some injury data this season that was compared to others. I think it was some that came out that we were like 3rd in terms of. But yeah, it's difficult because it's like you could do it by days players missed, but then it's like, well, if you're missing a youth team player and he's missed every single game, it's really difficult to know with that. So I'd hopefully see some good data on that. Gabby says KSE thinks we should tank for a better draft pick. Mate, football drafts, I'll be well into that. George Dimmy says our worst season of recent years and most injured. We are in 2nd place. God bless Arteta. We used to finish 8th and employ Mustafi. Yeah, well, at least we're annoyed about losing on a title race rather than on Europa League football. At least that's our copium. Ivan Smith says Chido Obi Martin must be screaming right now. I think he can certainly look at this as a missed opportunity. I think he probably would at least be on the bench. Would you agree?
He would be asked to start, I think, in the situation. Yeah.
Really?
Wow. And he's got a physical presence up there. And yeah, mate, like, again, he was in the mold of Ethan and I don't subscribe to this idea of like lowering down a talent because they haven't signed for you. He was a top talent. It was a really big miss, no doubt. I think he would have been very much in line to start previous matches, by the way, and he would have been able to give Havertz a rest as well.
No. K-Stacks says, accomplishment this season, record breakers, first team to come 2nd 3 years in a row. Sack them all end of the season. FFS knew this was coming. Maybe where we haven't gone with this is kind of into the what heads need to roll type level of thing. And again, this comes back to our conversation about where to apportion the blame, and that's very difficult to know. I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not calling for it, but I wouldn't be surprised if some heads rolled. I wouldn't, and it's certainly maybe in the medical department or maybe upstairs. I don't know, but surely there needs to be some accountability, even if it's just a conversation or a mea culpa in the media. I don't know, but there has to be someone has to come out who isn't Arteta and say, yeah, this is a bad situation, and that's on us in some way. Like someone has to, not necessarily lose their job, but someone has to.
I think the one thing that this guarantees is that Jason Ado will not be getting the permanent position. I don't think publicly you can face that outcome, and I don't think this is on. Huh?
Just if he does. Wow. Yeah. Fair play.
Like, so whatever small chance that he had, I think, is gone from just a PR perspective, and it's not even a comment on him as an individual or his competency. I don't think, but that certainly is step one. I'm not going to hide it. I've been bouncing around the bushes, but really, I'm not one to mince my words. And I think that Tim Lewis needs to be under serious investigation for why he's involved in football operations. I don't think Tim Lewis is somebody that's got no value. Okay. What I question is why a lawyer is on the football operations evaluation with no previous experience in that. Now, I think that lawyer is brilliant for competition law. Anything to do with issues with UEFA, he has to be kept on the board. I just don't understand why he's in the football operations tree. Yeah. Like if we built, Richard Garlick as managing director is the top, right? And he also is more taking over Vinay's role than he is any football operations. But he's got experience in terms of running West Brom. He was the director of football for the Premier League, for God's sakes, for years before we got him. So that's a football man. I understand why he's at the top of the pyramid, right? Then we're going to have another sporting director in here. They have to pair with Richard Garlick. Whoever that is, it has to be experienced. Okay? Beneath them, I can make a cogent argument with somebody like Jason Ado being a technical director, James Ellis, and, also I think there's also, there's one person, I forget his name, there's someone named King as well.
James King. Yeah,
James King.
He does contracts, I think.
Yes, he does. And, between King and Ellis and Ado, I can make a cogent argument that's a three-peat recruitment, you want to call it.
He's director of football operations, apparently.
Yeah. So if you were to make a cogent argument for those three operating underneath a top sporting director executive, I could understand that football tree with Arteta involved. So that's a four-pronged person of football people making decision making with somebody who is in charge of this long-term vision at the top. Okay. Pair that with a Richard Garlick. I understand that leadership tree. I've never understood why Tim Lewis is a part of that leadership tree. Even if you're a faucet to the Cronkies, how do you have experience or what qualifies you to adjudicate valuation to football assets and making decisions on a football vision inherently?
The only pushback I'd have, George, is we don't 100% know that is definitely what he does, but I agree with you if that is what he does. If he is the one saying,
what could he be doing if it wasn't that?
Well, no, I don't know, but what I'm saying is we don't have. I think an absence of an answer doesn't make it. Well, it has to be that. I think it could be something else. But if he is the person saying, I make the final call whether you spend 50 million or 55 million on Ollie Watkins, and I'm the one saying that, then yeah, I would agree with you. It's difficult to know, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it's like the final call per se. Like I'm sure what they're going to publicly say, it's a leadership decision, right? Amongst 4 or 5 people, that the decision is split between Josh, between Mikel, between Jason Ato, between Tim Lewis. They are all part of a decision-making board. But what I struggle with then is if 3 out of the 4 of your major heads in that decision-making tree agree to one thing and one person is reserved or opposing it, which is healthy, why did that win out? Like certainly a win on majority.
Where's the winning vote kind of thing? Yeah, absolutely. But and again, this needs to come from clarity. We get a press release saying this has happened, but then we don't get an understanding of what the role is, what the job, even just something on Arsenal.com, just an about. Here's what all the roles entail. It would be so simple, but they probably won't do it because they don't want us to know who's at fault. Junior Sterling can't play versus Chelsea. Yeah, he's ineligible.
I know.
Hopefully Martinelli's back by then. And at least that won't be a problem for that game.
Can I ask you a question though? With all of this, the sporting director is the one. We're talking organizational change, and we don't want to fill in the blanks. Then okay, let's not fill in the blanks. This is somebody new, a position that's open. I think that there's actually a very cogent argument that Mikel gets his pick of the litter after this, so. and it gets to the point where I think a Robert Olabe is certain to come in at this point. Like I've always thought he was a front runner. He was always part of the short list, in my opinion. But there was 3 names that I put: Simon Wolves, and I think Olabe, and I believe Dan Ashworth was actually a serious consideration, especially with his relationship with Richard Garlick, having worked in the past there. So I could understand those things. I just think that given everything that's happened and what KSC and the board have done to Mikel and how angry he must be, I wouldn't be surprised one of his soldiers.
I wouldn't be surprised if he threw his weight around a little bit and said, "Look, I want this guy, and I'm going to be really annoyed if I don't get him." I would not be surprised at all. And actually, fair enough, absolutely fair enough. Again, it comes back to it. This lack of clarity pushes a lot of people to just go, "Well, it's Arteta's fault." Yeah, a lot of it is Arteta's fault, but it's not all Arteta's fault. And he is the one who has to face the media, and he is the one who has to face all the questions from Sky saying, "Oh, another season we haven't won anything." It's like, well, yeah, but I wasn't supported, was I? So I would understand. I don't think he'll walk. I really don't think Arteta will walk. I think he's too far into this project. He's signed a new contract. Arteta's too sensible. He knows he's in his early 40s. He's got a long way to go. If he walks away from Arsenal at this point, it's silly, and he loves the club. But I think what he might do is what you said earlier: start to throw his weight around and say, actually, this is what I need. And if I don't get it, I'm going to start to do this. And if I don't get that, then, and be clear on what he needs. He's a process guy. I do think we're going to spend a lot of money in the summer, to be honest. And I think he'll get what he wants. But yeah. MJQ says, hopefully this changes Arteta's opinion of the best players in the world play every 2 or 3 days. This is the result of that approach. Look, I think just pure minutes-wise, players do match our players. The Salahs and the Haalands or whatever do play the same amount of minutes. It's just they're stood still off the ball. They're stood still off the ball, and that is the difference. And we ask so much of our players. That's maybe what I push back on.
Yeah, I've made this real big push online that I want to stop being quoted total minutes. It's a useless statistic in my view. It needs to be paired with the percentage of those minutes that are intense minutes, I would like to call
we
it.
need running data. So can someone, if you're watching this and you have any idea to get public running data, because that would change a lot of opinions on stuff, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, you also don't even need the running data. Like, you can see it as like an Arsenal fan, right? Like, the way that we work our wingers is the most in world football. There's enough data to support that in terms of the number of like defensive actions that they do, where they're doing it. There's a lot of that data. We don't have the necessary running data about accelerations and whatnot, but they're completing defensive actions with abnormal regularity, and they're taking less shots than forwards in world football with regularity. And we know the locations to which both of those are happening, and so we can see that side of the argument. But yeah, I'm kind of with you in terms of needing available running data would help quite a bit in a lot of analysis. I don't think we'll ever get that, because that is going to be hugely proprietary.
Clubs
That people, yeah, I don't think clubs want that information out there. But I also think, mate, like, I'm going to say this: if you want to be the best pressing team in the world, okay, which is our remit, that's kind of what we want to do, right? You need a big squad. If you're fundamentally going to do, and that's the only thing that I really disagree with Mikel, because he has made comments in the past that he wants, a small team, even though I think people misinterpret that view and they spin it to a different narrative. I don't think it's that he only wants 15, 16 players.
No.
He wanted quality. The issue wasn't, again, it's okay, fine, have 25 players, but if 10 are not quality, you're not going to use them. And so it's a waste of resources. That I understand. But the one thing I will criticize is, I think that if you're going to take this long term and say that we're going to maintain our position as one of the best pressing teams in the world, there's two things that need to happen. Fix your damn transitions as an offensive weapon. What's the point in creating all these high turnovers if you're not going to maximize them? That's point number one. That's a forward recruitment debate. And then secondly, make sure that you have enough players to rotate, because it's a taxing way to play. And if you're going to do this sustainably long term, you need 6 options that aren't a chance at a 17-year-old, a loan and a Sterling.
And if you're going to play that way, and 2 of your players who I think are worked out, I think it's almost 9,000 minutes between Saka and Jesus across the last 2 seasons. If they fall over and you don't replace them and you don't change your style, good luck.
Yeah.
Nick Campbell, why are our injuries always in clusters? I think it feels that way, Nick. I don't know, honestly, mate. And I think, again, it needs to come back to some good data. I would love, I said this earlier, and X did its thing, but my point was that I would love to see, because I'm not an expert, some good running data, some methodology stuff, a sense of is this abnormal? Should we be expecting this? A good meta-analysis of that would be amazing, but I doubt we'll ever get that. Outbackness, thank you for the super chat, very kind. Right, so we're going to come on to, as a closer, basically what we feel is achievable for the rest of the season. But before we do that, if you have enjoyed this stream, thank you so much. Make sure you like and subscribe. Been over 1,000 of you watching pretty much the whole time, which is amazing. So thank you so much. Make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching this for the first time. We were going to do an Erdegaard scouted, which we will do at some point, but obviously this news comes out and you just have to pivot. Make sure you want to sign up as a patron to get loads. We've got like 20 or so scouted episodes at this point of Sheshko and Williams and all these guys. You can go check that out for free. There's a link in the description.
But they don't help us, mate. So
they don't help us. Sorry, there's no players out there.
Yeah.
We didn't do them, did we? That was all a dream. Nico Williams didn't have a release clause, and he wouldn't have helped us. And also, what's even more frustrating is once you sign a player, you can't sell them.
Yeah,
that's the frustrating part, isn't it?
Yeah,
because you can't make it. You can't make a mistake, and then once that's it. The contract's up. You can't sell them. So yeah, we've got loads of scouted, loads of rewatch episodes and stuff you can check out. It's all in the back catalogue, so make sure you do. But thank you for being here. Let's close with this, George. I saw a comment earlier saying I can't wait for Alex's copium about how we're going to win the league. I have felt for a while I don't think it's in our hands, and now I think it is all but impossible to go and do that. What I'm looking for now this season is to do the best with what we have got. is to start to hear some serious stuff about the summer in terms of, Zubimendi, agreed, Semenyo, agreed, things like that, because I think that would send a really good message ahead of the summer and also help. It's that thing of who's coming to the party. Well, if he's going, then I'll go. And if he's going, then I'll go. And you start to play that game. And I want to hopefully come second. I think second would be a really good outcome from here. We've massively mismanaged this season. We've been, many factors come into that. We've had appalling refereeing going against us. We've had incredible amounts of injury luck, but we also have absolutely shot ourselves in the foot at board level. We've shot ourselves in the foot in terms of how we approach certain games with Arteta. And we need a massive summer to arrest this. I'm not like frothing at the mouth, but to me, it's approaching a point in the next sort of 12 months where I'm starting to say, okay, I'm getting angsty. Eat me. This guy is getting angsty. So I'm sure other people are pretty fuming. But give me your position and what you feel would be a good outcome for the rest of the season.
I've been somebody that's been very hopeful about the 1% of the league. No, I truly feel that with this injury with Kai Havertz out, it's irrecoverable. Yeah, like I'll go on stream to say that, like, I think it's impossible for us to win the league at this point. And so I look at protecting our assets for next season, and I hate that I'm doing it. It's why the only thing I push back, I am frothing because I'm in this point where I'm giving up on a season that I felt like we had a very good chance to win the league. And I was really insistent on that. Like, Arsenal have been the team that have collected the most points since August 2022. It's a long enough sample to sit there and say, we've been the best team in the freaking country. And ultimately, there's nothing to show for it. And I'm just so livid that I felt like we could have pushed on to do that. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Sure, we spent an all hour, 20 minutes in doing it. But that's where my biggest frustration goes. And I think it pains me to say that for me, the league season's done. Truly. And I think
weirdly, I don't think we'll win it. I have more hope for the Champions League.
Well, I was going to say, I think the Champions League, but a lot of that depends on Martinelli and Saka for me in terms of how they return. I think no matter what, we get through the next round, even in this horrific state, because the teams that we could face in terms of Serie A, I really put ourselves up against in terms of just physically being able to outcompete them, even in this physical state. I'm okay with that. Champions League becomes it should be the entire focus of the season. And you should be for me, you use the league as second priority, and you really highlight your ability to go far in that position and do the best that you can there. I can't make the cogent argument that I am confident given what's happened, let alone I felt we needed it regardless of the Champions League. Like, I thought a big thing about getting Ollie Watkins actually pushed that trophy more towards our favor in general. But I would say just get as far as you can. And namely, I still want to see a semifinal Champions League run. If I had to put like a metric towards what I would like for the rest of the season, like at minimum, I would want that.
And if we get a Saka and a Martinelli back, I don't think that's unachievable. We'll finish there. Thank you all so much for being here for nearly an hour and a half of us trying to make sense of this. Alejandro, final super chat. The club must spend over $300 million to make it up to us, the playing staff, and most importantly to Mikel. Please, Mr. Kroenke. Big summer ahead. Absolutely huge summer ahead. And I think it approaches, if we do what is right in the summer, well, put it this way. If we do what's right in the summer, I'm looking at Arteta next season. And if we don't do what's right in the summer, I'm looking at the Kroenkes next season. That's my position. I think it hinges on that. And I'm still positive. I think this, as you said, we're still the team who've got the most points in the league since August 2022. We're an unbelievable football team who've been let down by the board. And it's up to them now to make it right to us. Not even to us. And actually, I'm going to go back to what I said at the top of the show. To the players. The players are the stars here. Let's not forget that. Let's not think that because, of what a pundit says or what a manager says or whatever, the real people that make the difference are the players. And if you don't support the players, if you don't buy the right players, if you don't get the right players on the pitch, even the tactics, no matter what you do, nothing matters more than getting the right players and supporting them. It's not about fan dopamine or, whatever, and the Kroenkes, the Arteta, whatever. Just get the right players on the pitch. And look what we do. The most points in the league since August 2022. Support that team. That will win. And if you don't, it will all fall apart. And that's a reality we have to look at.
Yeah, I just think that I just know that this summer will be good, and it's going to make me even angrier.
I think so too.
Like it's actually going to make me even angrier when I look at it in retrospect, because I'm willing to go on stream right now. I think we could spend easily 250 million pounds this summer, and I think that's very cogent. But then it's going to make me so pissed off that there was people at the club that admitted that a year could go to waste because of that. And it's very reactive. I do think that for me, I've lost a lot of faith in the board with this decision. I kind of outlined in previous pods as to why. I'm already at a point where I'm really looking at the board. I think anything else of a failure, I'm at the point where I really wouldn't blame Mikel de Walk. This for me is one of the big red flags that he's faced in his tenure. And I think something similar along those lines with another similar level failure next year or even in the summer is something where I sit there and I say, like, I really wouldn't blame you leaving.
I think so. I think if we're at the same point next year and nothing's changed, I think you have to. Right, we'll finish there. We've got an instant reaction to the Leicester game coming on, Saturday. We've got a youth pod coming probably to maybe we'll put that out Friday now. We've got a TCB live Thursday and then main pod coming out on Monday post Leicester. Thank you all for being here. Jesus Christ, what is this season? Thanks for watching and thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying.